Hello, I'm Helen Driggs, Senior Editor for Lapidary Journal Jewelry Artist. In this video, we're going to learn how to machine finish your jewelry. We'll look at 3 different types of machines for finishing jewelry and explore the best uses for each. We'll also take a close look at the tools and equipment we'll use, learn how to use them safely. We're going to look at the tumbler, different media for tumbling, which kind of jewelry is appropriate to tumble. Then we'll move on to rotary tools like Dremels and flex shafts, and finally the polishing arbor. So let's get started. In this workshop video, we're going to be covering machine finishing. Anytime you are using machines, you want to work safe. So I'm going to start off by emphasizing a safe work environment and safe practices. Always the number one thing, protect your eyes with safety glasses. You want to wear natural fiber clothing, closed-toed shoes, because you want to be fireproof and protect your feet from dropping metal. You want to protect your eyes. You want to protect your lungs. If you're doing anything that throws off particles, wear a respirator or particulate mask. Tie back your hair. Don't wear long sleeves. Don't wear rings on your hands. I mean, I make jewelry, but I don't wear it in the studio because I want my hands to be free and safe. You want to use your brain and try and think something through, because if it seems dangerous or like you might take a risk of being hurt, think of a different way to do it. You don't want to go that way. Always work safe. So what is machine finishing? Basically, machine finishing is the same as hand finishing, but you're using power to do it faster or more efficiently. I could get a high polish on a piece of jewelry completely by hand if I wanted to, if I had a lot of time. Most jewelers who are making jewelry for money are concerned with time, so all of these tools have been developed to make it speedy to get the finish you want on jewelry. We've got 3 categories of tools, power tools, that we're using to polish with that are roughly equivalent to hand finishing. Basically, when you're shaping metal, you want to grind and shape, you want to pre-finish, and then you want to polish. When you're hand finishing, that's equivalent to files and sandpaper, maybe a little bit of flex shaft, and hand shaping, and then polishing with polishing papers. For machine finishing, you can use the tumbler to polish and rough finish. You can use the flex shaft to also polish and rough finish. And you can use the bench polisher to do the same thing. So depending on the shape, size, and finish that you desire, you'd use the 3 different categories of power finishing. I'm going to start by looking at finishes on jewelry. Metal can be very reflective, or it can be not reflective. You have to think of your piece and what you're trying to say with it, but if you look at these pieces of metal, these are bracelet links that I'm eventually going to put together, but they're a perfect illustration of all the different options that you have for finishing jewelry. This one is the one that people think of most, is that super high polish. Then you've got a satin finish, you've got textured finishes, you've got different colors of metal. Some of them have smooth edges, some of them have sharper edges. You've got different textures, you've got contrast. The thing that's interesting about this ring is that it's highly polished on one side, and you've got a Florentine finish on the top of the band. The interesting thing about metal is that you can use 2 different finishes on one piece and get the excitement of that high flash against that satin finish. So you have to think of your own piece and where you're going with it, and then decide how you're going to finish it. We're going to start with the tumbler, because that is the one that most people have available to them, and it's the easiest one to use. So I'm going to do a quick overview of the tools that we're going to use today. I want to stand up for this. Oh, actually, this is a good place to mention the height of the jeweler's bench. I look like I'm sitting kind of low to you. This has purpose. My eyes see best here. If I am working on my bench pin or polishing or doing close work that I need to see well, I want it to be, you know, about this far from my face. That's why the jeweler's bench is typically about 39 inches tall. I'm not short, I'm very tall, but I want to work where I can see. So that's why everything is positioned at this height instead of a standard work table, which would be lower. You want to try and work where you can see well. And this is sort of the jeweler's measurement right there. The distance from here to here in your nose is where you want your bench pin to be. So try and set yourself up to work like that. The nice thing about this bench pin too is you can take it off and get it out of the way if you need to work on the tabletop. So now we're going to look at the different tools that we'll be using today. I've got a tumbler, which is a machine that spins a barrel. You've got the barrel, and then usually you have some kind of media to go with it. This is stainless steel shot. There's also plastic media of different sizes and shapes. These are blue plastic cones. You have to choose, again, like all of these polishing processes, the size and shape and finish of your jewelry is going to determine the best method to finish it. So plastic media, steel media, there's walnut shell, there's ceramic. Depending on how aggressive a cut you want to make, that's the media you choose. Most people start with stainless steel shot. These are mixed shapes. You'll see there's balls, pins, rods, cones. What these do is they burnish the metal as it's spinning inside of this barrel under power. How you set the tumbler up is you put your media in and you use a little bit of a lubricant like dishwashing liquid, or there's, you know, proprietary mixtures of polishing media, burnishing compounds. They're like any polishing compound, they're appropriate to the metal. There's some that work well with brass and bronze, some that work well with silver, some that work with gold. You have to shop the catalog and determine what is best for your chosen metal. Then we have rotary tools. A lot of people start with a plain Dremel like this. They are either variable speed or fixed speed. They work with a power button. They have a whole assortment of attachments that you insert tips in here, and we'll get into that a little later. This is a good starting point for getting used to finishing with a rotary tool like this. The next step up is the flex shaft, and it's sort of the next logical step. A flex shaft is, you can see it's a lot smaller than this. The good thing about these, and the thing that makes them the easiest to use, is you control the speed of the motor with your foot. So you can turn it on and off or make it go faster or slower as you're using it. This doesn't give you that option. It's a great place to start, but eventually if you get serious about your jewelry, you're going to want one of these. The final option and the biggest investment, and the one that takes the most skill, is a polishing arbor. They call them polishing arbor, bench lathe, buffing machine. We've got a small one back here that I'll demo later. It's basically a motor with spindles that you put wheels on and you polish with it. It takes a lot of skill to use one, and they can be dangerous if you use them wrong, so I'm saving that one for last. So now I'm going to show you how to set up your tumbler. So now we're going to set up a batch to tumble, and I'm going to talk about types of jewelry that are appropriate to tumble, why you would tumble, and why these are very cool to have in your shop regardless of what kind of jewelry make. The coolest thing about tumblers is you can multitask. You can throw a batch in the tumbler and polish, burnish, and work harden it while you are doing something else. It's a passive method of jewelry finishing and very useful to have around, especially when you're on deadline. All tumblers have the same 3 components. You've got the machine that drives the barrel, you've got the tumbling barrel, and you've got the media that you're tumbling in. This one is the stainless steel shot, and I showed you the plastic media like this. To lubricate this, we use water and soap like this, or a burnishing compound. For today, I'm going to use the stainless steel shot because the pieces I want to tumble are appropriate for that media, and I'll tell you why in a minute. To load the tumbler, I pour the shot in. I add 1 drop of soap, because any more than that and you'll have suds all over the studio. And then water. And I've filled this about, I don't know, a little less than half, because this is not a big load of metal to put in there. I'm going to set that aside for the second, and we're going to look at the pieces I'm going to throw in there. The objects to tumble are, it's a tough call sometimes on what to tumble and what not to tumble. Obvious things to throw in the tumbler: chain. Chain does great in the tumbler because it's flexible, it'll move around a lot, it's usually pretty sturdy. It's hard to get in and around all of these links with a flex shaft, and it's actually dangerous to polish chain with the bench lathe. So I would always opt for tumbling chain rather than any other finishing method. So those of you who make chainmail or knitted chain, get yourself a tumbler. It'll be the easiest way to polish. So chain into the drink. Other good things to tumble: metal clay. I've just discovered this medium, starting to experiment with it. I'm finding interesting things to do with it, but the tumbler is the best way to deal with this material after it comes out of the kiln. You'll see it's got this white finish. It's just the raw metal. These are fresh from the kiln, and the tumbler will burnish and work harden these extremely well. So I'm going to throw these metal clay pieces in there too. If you've got tiny little areas like this loop or undercuts, you might think twice about putting them in the tumbler, because sometimes the media can get stuck in those openings. So look at the size of openings on your piece and determine if that media you put in there is going to get stuck in there. Anything that's iffy or risky, leave it out. Like this bead, this is a metal clay bead. I'm afraid that some of those needle shapes in that shot are going to get stuck in there, so that one I'm not going to tumble. But anything flat or with big openings like this, even if there's texture on it, go ahead and throw it in the tumbler, because it will burnish it and give it a nice finish. So I'm going to throw them in there too. Now, beads like this that I fabricated by hand, this one is metal clay and it's got a large hole. These are fabricated from sheet, and they've got teeny openings in them. These will do fine in the tumbler because nothing's going to get inside of there and stuck except for water, and that's not that big a deal. You can deal with water. You don't want compound or shot in there. Plain rings like these are also great in the tumbler. These are all just stock rings. Some have patina, some don't have patina. Rings do great in the tumbler as well. But if you've got a stone in it, don't put it in the tumbler. So I'll throw the rings in. I normally do not mix metals in a tumbler load. These are bronze castings and textured bronze sheet. I'm not going to put them in the same load as the sterling silver because I just don't like mixing up the metals in the shot or in the medium. So if I'm going to tumble a brass load or a bronze load or a copper load, I keep that separate from my sterling silver. These are also patinaed bronze that I put a jet black patina on. They will also come out great in the tumbler. It will remove the black from the high areas but preserve the black in the undercuts, and that gives a nice, contrast of black and white on, or in this case gold and bright on these kinds of pieces. So to reiterate, you use the tumbler to burnish and work harden, to polish pieces, and to multitask. Now, every tumbler is different, but you'll see I've got the load in there and the water and the soap and the media. This tumbler works by inserting the lid, and then there's a little collet, and then you just put the lid on, and you put the screw on. And the nice thing about this one is as it pulls up, it creates a seal on this so the liquid won't come out. And I just hand tighten that, and then I always double check that I'm not going to leak, because water and electricity don't play nice together. And then you put it in, oops, this way, backwards. And this particular tumbler has a great little feature. There's a plastic slide here that you can use to keep the barrel away from the edge, because sometimes it will get stuck. And then you just turn it on, and now that media and soap and jewelry is starting to burnish itself while I do something else. When you're tumbling your jewelry, it depends on what you're polishing and what finish you're going for. If you're trying to rough cut things, it might take, like if you've just taken a bronze casting out, say these things have been cast and you see they have a very rough surface, these will probably take a lot longer to tumble than something, you know, smoother like a silver or a copper link like this. You sort of have to guesstimate, but a rough guideline is start with a 20-minute batch, stop the tumbler, open it and look. If it needs more time, put the lid back on and run it some more. But usually between 20 minutes and an hour is enough to do any tumbling thing that you'd like to do. So we're going to take this somewhere else in the studio, plug it in and let it run, and we'll do a big reveal at the end. I'll also throw some of the black and bronze in so you can see that, the difference between the raw ones and the polished ones. Now we're going to go to Rotary Tools, which are the largest category of machine finishing, the most popular. And there's two different versions. There's the Dremel, like this, this is a perfectly great machine. Any of the attachments that you use with a flex shaft, you can use in a Dremel. The plus sides to these are they're less expensive than this. They're easy to get. You can go into a big box home supply store like Home Depot or Lowe's and get one of these. You know, they're easy to use, easy to get. The reason I don't opt for this anymore is it's a big thing to hold, and when I'm working with jewelry, I've got to move this entire thing. Your arm gets tired. The other thing is this, once you choose a speed, you are stuck with that speed until you switch it, and you can't get the subtleties that you can with this one. So these are great. If you're just starting out, get one, try it, use it, learn how to control it. And then when you're able to graduate to one of these, go ahead. It won't hurt you to have both. These are also great for, I keep one in the shop for just utility things. There's some terrific attachments for the Dremel. Like these are meant for woodworking, sanding discs, but they give you a beautiful surface on your metal. So play with these things. Play with the Dremel, play with the attachments. You can do a lot of cool things with a Dremel. But for the most part, I stick to the flex shaft. So now I'm going to talk about safety one more time. These machines are not toys. There's a spinning motor. It's under power. Sometimes you have very sharp things in here. You need to be mindful of what your hands are doing. Tie back your hair. If you have crazy curly hair like me, even though I've got a ponytail, I still, just to be safe, I get one of these clippy things and get my hair away from my face and away from my hands. You're not going to win a glamour contest doing this, but you're going to be safe. Always, always, always wear your safety glasses and protect your eyes. When you're using the machine, anytime you are changing bits or burrs, get your foot away from the pedal. Do not be near the pedal, because you could drop something and look for it and your foot will touch the pedal and boom. Do not do that. I always tuck my feet under my stool like that when I'm changing burrs and bits. When I insert attachments into this, I keep it flat on the desktop. I open it with the chuck. I insert whatever burr it is that I'm using. Oops, other way. My feet are tucked under myself on my chair. There we go. I insert the drill bit and I hold it and I tighten it. And then the first thing I do is get this away from it. I step on the gas and I observe that bit. If it's parallel to the desktop and spinning normally, I've got it in there right. If it's going like this, it's inserted crooked and it's dangerous. Do not play around with this. Also on the thicker shaft ones, insert them in as far as they go, because these can break off and become dangerous flying objects in your studio. So, you know, insert them into the machine and work safe. So that's the safety lecture. Now I'm going to talk about the different options you have for using one of these. The motor come in many different levels of power. Some only go in one direction, some are reversible, and that's handy if you're left-handed. You can get a reversible one and it will spin away from you instead of towards you and throw stuff in your face. The horsepower of the motor, if you're working with stone, you want to go for a more powerful one. There are setting hand pieces which burnish the metal. They basically vibrate like this and burnish the metal. There are fixed size ones that have a lever so that only a 3/32 mandrel fits in there. So when you're purchasing drill bits, make sure you're getting the right ones. You can get skinny drill bits or fixed shaft size. The handpiece is the part that you're going to be holding in your hand. So if you have tiny hands, you might want to go for a smaller handpiece. The way of holding it, it depends on you and your work, but you want to try and keep as much stability in your hands as you can when you're using this. Don't try and drill like this. You want to hold your work and hold your wrists and arms in and, you know, try and use the machine in the safest, most steady way you can. The types of work that you can do with a flex shaft are as varied as the types of tools that you can use for hand finishing. There are many, many assortments. If you're just starting out with this, the thing I suggest to all my students is just buy an assortment kit like this if you're looking to, you know, shop a certain brand. Every company has their own proprietary mixture of abrasive and carrier. These are rubber wheels with abrasive built in. This is the Kratex ones. A lot of people use those. There's Advantage by Rio. There's 3M products. I mean, there's billions of choices for these. Every jewelry supply house has their own brand. What you have to do is experiment and see what works for your work. There are also, for sanding, there are wheels that have different grits of abrasive. These are the Mizzy wheels, another very popular brand. This is basically silicon carbide grit embedded into the carrier, and these cut metal. All of them cut metal, just at different rates of aggressiveness, and they are equivalent to hand tools, your files, and sandpaper. All of these things are basically files and sandpaper under power. For polishing, you have brushes, steel, brass brushes. There's sandpaper on different mandrels. You can use muslin or chamois. There's felt, fabric, bristle. There's, like I said, millions of options, but it really depends on the type of work you're doing and the kind of finish you want to get. If you look at these, it will help you decide what to use them for. This one looks like sandpaper. So always think in your mind, if I were hand finishing this, what tool would I use? If I'm using sandpaper, I want to go for a gritty disc. If I'm polishing something, I want to go for a cloth disc because I would use a polishing cloth to polish. If I'm cutting away metal, I want to use something that abrades. So I would go for, you know, something like this or something like this because I want to remove metal. all of these things just replace whatever you're doing by hand. Now I'm going to go through a group of different shaped jewelry objects and show you roughly how to use these things and what they would do. Okay, so when we get into the flex shaft, it's a very confusing category for a lot of people, even if you have a lot of experience, just because there are so many options. It's really hard to figure out what to use with what does what should I buy, how am I going to get this finish. It's a lot of experimentation, but basically you have 3 jewelry operations that this machine will do. It will grind, it will refine, and it will polish. Equivalent to your hand tools, that's filing, sanding, and burnishing. If you keep that in your head, when you're looking at the different attachments, they will sort of suggest to you what they're going to do. You've got different shapes, different sizes, different colors, different companies, but really just look at the tool. If it's gritty, it's going to cut metal faster than something that's not gritty. So you want to do your grinding operation first because you would use a file first. You want to do your sanding operation second because you would use sandpaper next. And then you want to do your polishing operation third because then you would polish. So try and keep that in your head and you're halfway there. The first thing I'm going to do is take off my watch because, again, with this tool, safety is everything. And I have little fuzzies on my bracelets. I'm just going to tape them to my wrists so they don't go anywhere. The first thing I'm going to do is equivalent to filing. Grinding. The grinding category for the flex shaft is the biggest one because there are attachments that grind metal, there are attachments that grind stone, there are attachments that grind plastics, resins, glass, anything you can do by hand or with other machinery you can do with this one. I have this pierced pendant that I sawed out and I gave it a sort of a fast run through with my files and my sandpaper, but now I'm at the refinement stage. So this is where I would switch to the flex shaft. I have a couple of edges here that the distances are not equal to my eye, so I want to take metal off. I could sit here at the bench with my file and file all of these edges by hand and it would take me half a day. I'm going to use power instead. So I'm going to load, this is a Mizzy wheel. It's silicon carbide grit in rubber. This is very popular for this sort of operation. There's also these grinding wheels that you can buy from jewelry supply houses. Also, another thing to remember with these attachments is each one has its own mandrel. The mandrel is the part that inserts into here, and this is what spins, and it holds the tool. You'll need to have a screwdriver to put these on. The Mizzy wheels have a larger, deeper mandrel because they're thick. So you'll see the screw in here is very long to hold this inside of this tool. So that's how all of these things work. You just screw the mandrels on and then they're ready to go like this. Some of them, it's a permanent attachment because this is resin mixed with grit, and they make them in molds and you'll wear them out and throw them away, but don't throw them away. Save the steel because you can make tools out of that. So I'm going to insert this into my flex shaft, and I need to get my hands working here. I like to eyeball the end of this to here and get about in the right place. And then give it a tightening, and now my feet are going back to the pedal. Okay, that's in there straight. So, you know, back to this. I could sit here like this and file it and then go to my next smallest file and file some more, and then go to my sandpaper and sand, grit by grit by grit. Or I could just do this. Much faster. And little pieces of metal are flying off and hitting me in the chin. I can feel it. That's why the safety glasses are important. You don't want grit in your eyes. You're not going to ever win a glamour contest doing this. You're going to get grit all over your face, dirt all over your face, and your fingernails are going to disappear, so kiss your manicure goodbye. But you can see the way I'm holding my hands, I'm trying to steady the piece, and I'm just trying to steady the tool and the piece with as much contact as I can possibly get. And you can see that this is starting to take metal off here. I can just take this one I'm just going to sacrifice so you can see how fast this tool cuts. If I keep it in, I mean, that's really removing metal at a rapid rate. You don't really want to do that to your jewelry, but you can. Keep that in mind. Go lightly. Don't be too aggressive too fast. And another thing I do is I run at a low speed and I keep this tool still and I move the work. It's like sawing. It's like sawing. You move the metal, not the tool. And you can see I'm starting to take a significant amount of metal off these edges where it's uneven. These will cut very, very, very fast, so keep moving, always keep moving. If you're stopping to think, take your foot away from the pedal and look at the piece, because it only takes a split second to make a big mistake and ruin your metal. So that's the aggressive grinding of this. This is a very big wheel. If I wanted to get inside of these, I need to switch to a smaller attachment like this one, for instance, will get inside of here. Any of these teeny ones I would do by hand. You can find small bits that will fit in there, but I prefer, my personal feeling is I want to get in there with a needle file and do those by hand. But for bigger areas like this, these attachments are terrific. This one undercuts. If I wanted a beveled edge, I could come in and get an angle. You can see the profile of that would cut a nice 45-degree angle on the inside of that opening. So depending on your piece, you pick the attachment. So grinding equals filing. Something that is also very helpful to do, and I'm going to show you my little cheat sheets here. For each brand of tool that I choose to buy, I make a little sheet like this with color coding. And that way, when I'm at my bench, if I'm using, you know, my discs, I know that the terracotta is 150 grit. The finer terracotta is 240 grit. And the aluminum oxide is the white one. And that way I just prop that there and I go, oh, which one am I using next? I look at my cheat sheet and eventually your brain will remember for you. If you use them a lot, your brain will remember for you too. That's a quick little tip that will help you sort of sort out this massive amount of information. So that's the grinding section. So the next thing you're going to do is, after grinding, grinding is equivalent to filing. You've got your basic shape of your jewelry object. You're pretty happy with it. Now it's time to start refining it. So you would, if you were doing this by hand, you would go from your different cuts of files from coarse to smooth. Then you would go to your sandpaper from coarse to smooth. You can do that with a rotary tool as well. There's again, a huge number of attachments you can choose from for sanding. Let's put the grinding aside and go to sanding. My personal preference is I like these little flat discs that snap on and snap off. You can see this little mandrel has a square on the top, and the center of these discs have a square hole. You just pop them on here and you give them a little twist and they're ready to rock. These are awesome. They're my total favorite attachment for this, and they come in different sandpaper grades. This is the fine, this is actually the extra fine and coarse. Again, you just insert into the handpiece, and this is a bracelet that's just hammer formed. It also has a texture on it, but it has, you can see I've got some wonky edges that I want to take off to make sure it slides on and off my wrist comfortably. This tool is great for that. I would start with the coarsest grit. So I'm going to snap that on. I'm not stuck with this shape too in the sanding. There are other options. There are barrel mandrels, so you can do the inside of ring bands. There's large and small in different grits. These are the 3M ones. The nice thing about the 3M product is their color coding is the same across the line. So the peach is always going to be the same grit in 3M products, no matter which size mandrel I'm using, small or large. The peach ones are all the same grit. So once you master your color coding like this, you know that the peach equals this grit or the orange equals this grit in that entire line of products. Same with any other company for the most part. The Advantage, I have to look at my cheat sheet, I'm sorry. They go from fine to coarse depending on the color. So no matter what shape you're using, as long as it's that color, it's that grit. So that's a very helpful thing that manufacturers do for us. Since we have so many options in shape, the color coding helps you remember the grit. So anyway, back to sanding. You'd start with coarse. Again, I'm going to make sure I'm spinning right. Let's move this guy out of the way. And I'm going to support this just like I would anywhere else. And another thing I can do is take my bench pen and move a little closer. I just want to, I try and go away from myself because it's going to throw up grit. And if I come toward myself, it's going to go right in my face. So, you know, I would just run around the edge and take those wonky edges off. You can see I'm keeping my fingers away from the tool. I have my safety glasses on, and I'm not flooring it. I'm trying to go, you know, at a comfortable speed that I can control. The number one thing to remember with any of these rotary tools, safety-wise, is if anything happens, just let go. If it pulls out of your hand, let go. Don't try to hold it because then you will get hurt. That's particularly important with the polishing, the bench lathe or the polishing arbor. But you can see I'm starting to get a more even edge on this bracelet. And this one I put a patina on, so you can see the contrast between, I'm going to highly polish this edge eventually because I like the contrast between the blackened surface here and then that nice bright edge, shiny edge that I'll get on there. But I have a lot of refinement to do before that. So I would run through these discs the same way I would run through my sandpaper. This was the coarse, then I would switch to the fine, then I would finish with the extra fine, and then I'm ready to polish. Same as hand finishing. Sanding coarse, sanding medium, sanding fine, then polish. You're going to progress from the most aggressive cut through the middle cut to the least aggressive cut, and then go to your next operation. Okay, so the next logical step after grinding and sanding, equivalent to filing and sanding, would be pre-polish and then polish. Pre-polish is sort of the funnest category with this tool because you're starting to see what the finish of your jewelry is going to look like. I like to keep my tools for pre-polish in a box, divided boxes like this. That way if I go to a workshop, I can just close the lid and take this with me, and I know that I can get from sandpaper to a high polish in one box. These little divided boxes are great. A tool that I use a lot, well, a brand that I use a lot for this is the 3M brand. These have pretty much changed the way jewelry makers are working. Again, I use my little cheat sheet for this because I cannot remember what color does what. I like to organize them in my box according to which grit they progress through. So I know I start here and I finish here. I also put the little mandrel that goes with these discs in the cubby with it. So I know when I go, I'm ready. The thing about the 3M discs is mounting them on the mandrel. I did a little diagram for myself. Think of them like a hurricane. That's the only thing I can make it equivalent to. Is you don't want the little arms to spread open as you're polishing. So this spins toward you. You want the arms to aim away from you so that the curve of this little hurricane is aiming toward you. You don't want the arms to aim at you. You want the curve to aim at you. Okay, so I'm going to mount these on the mandrel, and it's a good idea to use more than one. You can use 3 to 5 of these little discs next to each other because they just do a better job that way. It's what the manufacturer recommends. And you can see I've got all the little arms aiming in the same direction. So we're going to put them on the screw so that all the little arms are facing in the same direction. And you don't want the arms to open, so I always verify when I insert them into the handpiece that I've got them going the right way. Yes, life is good. Okay. Now this is pumice. With the 3M line, you can see by my cheat card that the yellows are 80 grit, the terracottas are 220 grit, the blues are 400, the pinks are pumice, and then we go to the polish side of things. Peach is 6 micron, mint is 1 micron. That is the same no matter what size of this little disc you are using. That's the beautiful thing about this line of products. Once you memorize this, which I have not done yet, and I doubt I ever will because my brain doesn't do numbers, once you memorize the color coding or you set up your box with the color coding, it will always be the same. Even, I mean, even the jewelry supply houses know when you call them up and say, I need the little 3M wheels in the pink. They know which ones to send you. You don't have to memorize the grits. So I'm going to do a little work on this bracelet. This is a formed anti-clastic curve that I hammer formed by hand. You can see all my hammer marks in here, and I gave it a little patina ahead of time. Now I want to refine it a little bit because over time brass tarnishes, and I have to keep coming back to this bracelet and polishing it again and again. So these, again, I want to brace my hands, brace the piece on the bench, wear my safety goggles, and go slowly. I'm going to start working over here, and you can see it's taking that tarnish off really fast. These work well in a circular motion. They're very consistent. The grit is consistent through the little wheels, and I just think they are a tremendous, tremendous thing. Give them a try. And you can see I'm removing tarnish very fast with these. I'm not going too fast. This is a pretty wonky edge. I probably wanted to sand that a little more, but for demo purposes, it's okay. But you get the idea. This pumice is equivalent to the highest grade of sandpaper, like a 1500 or something around there. And you can see the tarnish came off on the wheel, the black on the wheel. Eventually these will wear out and they'll start to lose their little arms, and then you know it's time to replace them. But they last a long time and they work really well, and pretty much every jeweler I know loves them, so give them a try. Just buy a kit and go for it. So that's pre-polish. I want to take off all the tarnish, any extra patina. I want to try and get all of the marks that I see out of this piece. Any file marks, any dings, dents, any sharp edges. You want the piece to start feeling good at this point. If you discover a big scratch when you get to this point, you have to go backwards and go to the preceding operation, smooth that dent or scratch out, and then come back to polish. You're not stuck once you get to this point. If you find something, take the time, go back, grind it out, sand it out, and then come back to polishing. No one's going to punish you for going backwards and coming forward again. It depends, again, on your piece and what you're going for, but you know, take the time to get a good finish. So that's the pre-polish. Polishing is the final step in all jewelry making, where pretty much everybody who makes jewelry, their dream is to get a highly reflective surface like this. Some pieces call for this, some don't. This is a very difficult, it's attractive, but very difficult to get, very difficult to maintain, especially on the base metals. This one is brass. Fingerprints get on here, scratches get on here. You'll have a beautiful finish like this, but you will pay the price for it because you have to keep going back and polishing, polishing, polishing. It's lovely, but it's difficult to get. It's worth doing, but know that it's a lot of maintenance to keep a high polish like this on a piece of jewelry. I'm going to show you how to polish a piece. This is Kumbu on fine silver. This is a metal clay piece that I made. Again, I just started experimenting with this media and it's very interesting to me. This is gold attached to the surface of the silver through diffusion bonding. Heat will cause the gold to bond to the fine silver. It's fun to play with, but polishing these kinds of pieces it's difficult because whether it's traditional metal or metal clay, this is a very thin piece of gold adhered to its actually molecular bond to the fine silver. You don't want to be too aggressive or you will take the gold off and it will fly away in your studio. So normally I would use Prepolish, which is a cutting media. All of these polishing medias it's a wax or paraffin or grease binder with grit in it. Prepolish is typically the first one, and rouge, jeweler's rouge, is the second one that you would use. I keep them in separate plastic bags, and I keep the tip that I'm using with that media in a separate plastic bag because they will cross-contaminate each other, and you'll have the finer grit of the rouge polluted with the coarser grit of the Prepolish, and you will actually cut scratches into your piece. You've finally gotten to the place where you want a high polish, and then you go and cut grooves in it is not fun. So keep your media separate and the wheels that you use them for separate. This one is Prepolish for me. On the Kumbu piece, I would not use Prepolish because I don't want to cut the gold away and make it disappear. I'm going to go straight to the rouge. We'll experiment more with Prepolish when we get to the bench lathe. So here's the jeweler's rouge, and with any of these media, a little bit goes a long way. I'm using a cone-shaped attachment. This is made of compressed fiber. It's just fabric here that's compressed really tight like felt. It actually is the same thing as felt. Sometimes it's cotton, sometimes it's woolen cotton, sometimes it's synthetic fiber. And I'm going to test that now. For the rouge, I only open it a teeny bit, and you don't need to put a lot on here. I just barely touch it until it changes color, and you see that has a red tinge to it. That's plenty of rouge for this piece. I'm going to get the bench pin for this because I want to see it up close to myself. Again, safety goggles. This won't throw out a lot of stuff, but it will decorate your face with interesting colors. So don't polish and then go out to dinner without looking in the mirror first. I'm going to hold this piece down with my fingers and go slowly. And you can see right there, I started to take that gold off on the edge. It's very thin. I don't want to press too hard, but I just want to touch this a teeny bit and get some sheen on there. And you can see with this shape polishing attachment, I'm trying to go parallel with the surface of my piece, because if I go in like this, I'm going to cut away gold from one area. It's good for little details around like this on the silver, but for the gold, I want to try and go as gently and non-aggressively as possible to bring up that color. And when you have a piece like this, it's sometimes a little acrobatic to hold those down and polish them, but you get the idea. Go slow, Don't use too much medium. And the most important thing I can tell you with using any of these waxy mediums is, if I were using Tripoli and then going to rouge, I want to wash the piece in hot soapy water at the sink and get all of this off before I progress to this, because that will cross-contaminate my attachments as well. So this needs to have a bath now, and then it's ready to wear. There's a lot of black on here still that I don't want to go on my customer's neck when they put this necklace on, so give it a wash with warm soapy water next. So that's what I would do with Kumbu, but I'm going to go back to this highly polished piece, which has big fat ugly thumbprints on it now. You can see there's a little water spot right there. I'm going to go ahead and polish that out with this so you can see it on a more reflective surface. The Kumbu piece has texture. It's a kind of a different approach than a highly polished one. This one I do want a little bit of pressure. You can see that black? That is a combination of the polishing media and the tarnish coming off of this piece. So I want to put a little pressure. I'm trying to brace it and hold it as flat as possible. And you can see I'm really getting a mirror finish on that. Again, I'm not going too fast because I don't want to create heat in the metal. If the piece starts to get warm, you're pressing too hard or you're going too fast. And you can see there's quite a bit of reflectivity on that metal. And that's kind of the dream finish that everybody wants to go for. This is basically equivalent to burnishing by hand and using polishing paper by hand. And that's how you get a high polish. Okay, so we're going to just do a little review now. We've got grinding, which is equivalent to the files and coarse sandpaper. You would use grinding wheels for that. Then we go to sanding. Oh, and I showed you the sanding discs and the sanding drums. This is equivalent to your hand sanding and very fine files. Then we have pre-polish and polish, which is the equivalent of using the jeweler's rouge at the big polishing arbor or using polishing papers by hand, or the burnisher. All of these processes have a hand equivalent. They just do it faster and more efficiently. You know, if you were hand finishing jewelry, you would file, sand, and polish with papers. You're doing the same thing with this, just with these specialized attachments. There's, you know, nothing to be afraid of. Try it. So while I have the flex shaft out, I thought I would show you some of the other fun finishing processes that you can do with this or the Dremel. It doesn't have to be this. You can also do it with the Dremel. These are great for drilling, grinding, basic metal forming. You can cut grooves with them. You can texture metal with these. You can get fantastic texture using the power of this tool. You don't have to just sand and polish with it. You can cut and form with it as well. The thing I use it most for is drilling holes for cold connections or openings in metal pieces. This is a little sample pendant I made to test some alphabet stamps and pattern stamps. And I've drilled some holes in there that I want to refine a little bit. So first I use the tiny drill bit in here to drill these holes through. And now I'm going to use a ball burr to cut a little bevel around them. So safety glasses, because we're cutting metal. Again, using these tools, you want to brace as much as possible. And another thing, I never drill through my bench pin. I always have a wooden block, because putting a million holes in this so that it eventually looks like this, to me, is annoying to work, because then they fill with metal shavings, or I'll drop a stone down inside one of the holes and I have to turn it upside down and try and find it. I always just drill on a piece of scrap wood. It's just personal preference. Some jewelers, they have Swiss cheese bench pins and they're fine with it. It's really just your ick tolerance. But anyway, for using the ball burr, any metal burr, You want to lubricate it a little bit because cutting metal will untemper the tool, and that means that heat and friction will cause the cutting edges of this tiny little burr to become dull over time. The lubrication prevents that from happening. It will happen eventually, but you want to slow that process down as much as possible. For drilling metal and grinding metal with a metal burr, you want to go slowly and carefully. For stone, you want to go fast and get through it as efficiently and quickly as possible because you are taking the risk of the stone cracking. But for metal, you want to go slow to preserve the temper of your steel tools. I'm bracing just like before, and I'm just going to slowly get into those holes that I drilled, and I'm just going to touch it and take it away and keep checking my progress. And you can see I've cut a nice little bevel around the edge of that hole just to refine it a little bit. Then I would take my hand sanding paper or the sanding tip and give this a little polish. And you see how I've got reflectivity where the cut metal is and a more satin finish on the surface. It's fun to play with these different tips like this to see what they will do for your pieces. I could also make these holes much bigger. With a cone-shaped burr, I could cut like a V-shaped hole. This is a rounded hole. There's bud burrs and flame burrs and setting burrs and inverted cone burrs, cup burrs for finishing the ends of wire and prongs. Again, like all the grinding and polishing tips, there are millions of options. You just have to experiment, but looking at the shape of the tool will give you some clue what to use it for. So really, if you're going to play with using the flex shaft, get an assortment of these and experiment with them and see what they do. Another thing I like to use them for is cleanup. This tool is great for cleanup. I have a metal clay piece that just came out of the kiln. It's still white. A lot of metal clay artists do this brass brush by hand, but you can use your flex shaft to bring a little polish to these metal clay pieces. It's the same process as doing it by hand. Oops, that's crooked. Okay, this is a good opportunity. This is in here crooked. That's how I can tell. See it vibrating like that? Wrongo bongo. Do not go there. Don't even try and use it like that. You want it to go in straight and spin parallel to the handpiece. So let's tighten that one in. Okay, much better. See, it's not moving anywhere. The only thing I see moving is the tip of the tool. That's in there right. So to burnish this little metal clay piece, this is a sea urchin test that I made a mold from. And it has interesting texture, but it's got the kiln white. You can really see it on the back. Metal clay pieces have that whiteness to them when they come out of the kiln. So I would do the same thing that you would do by hand with a brass brush and soap over the sink. Just dip that in water and soap. This will get a teensy bit messy, but it's okay. Just have a tissue nearby. Hold it as firmly as you can and just run this over it. This is good for general cleanup. Any metal piece that you would brass brush by hand, you can use your flex shaft. We'll give that a little bath. And you can see how much shinier it is now. Of course, I'm going to want to refine that and take it to as high a polish as I can, but very fast to do it this way. If you have a lot of metal clay pieces that you need to polish, this is a great way to do it. So that's a little bonus. One more thing I like to do with the flex shaft is you can get bristle brushes in two different hardnesses. There's gray, black, and white. The bristles are more stiff. These are great for cleanup as well with soap and water. You can get into a textured piece like this with patina on it and give it just a little cleanup like this. It's like giving it a scrub. And again, I just splattered my face, so it's good to have your safety goggles on. It's getting a little shinier. This is copper, so it's not going to get super shiny, but it's getting a little cleaner in those areas that don't have the patina on them. I may want to get in there with Prepolish after this and take some of that patina off. But you get the idea. The bristle brushes are just like using a toothbrush with soap at the sink on your metal pieces. So that's another thing you can do with this in this category of finishing your jewelry. Now we're into the final section of this workshop, and that's using the polishing arbor, or otherwise known as the bench lathe or the buffing machine. You'll see these in a lot of jewelry studios big. I'm going to say this, for the benefit of filming this, we've taken the safety hoods off of this machine. Normally there are hoods on the back that shield the back of the wheels. We've taken them off so you can see what I'm doing, but never use your machine without the proper safety features on it. We're only doing this for the benefit of, you know, filming it, but you want to run it with your shields on there. But if we had these ends covered, you couldn't see what I was doing. So we've taken them off, and I'm going to work extra super safe today. Safety goggles are a must with this machine. You always want your hair back, no long sleeves, no dangly bracelets, no rings, no nothing on your hands. Clear the area all around the machine, and be aware that anything that if you lose hold of a piece of jewelry, it is going to fly out of this machine at high velocity. You don't want to get hurt, so always operate them with the safety features in place, or don't use it. This machine is just like hand finishing. You can grind, you can sand, you can polish with this. Most people reserve it for polishing large pieces that they want to be highly reflective. But there are options to do other finishes. There are brass brushes like this that you can put on here to get a satin finish like this. There are grinding wheels to take away areas or give a rough texture or clean off large surfaces quickly, like these 3M discs. There are also specific texturing discs like this one. It's a steel wheels. This creates a Florentine finish, kind of like this, but with more significant lines. This wheel also fits on here. Any of the little 3M hurricane wheels like I showed you in the flex shaft earlier, they come large size like this in 4-inch wheels and bigger wheels to fit on the larger buffing machines. So every option you have for the flex shaft, you also have for the polishing machine. The habit that I'm in with this is, again, I don't want to cross-contaminate my media. So each wheel that I have, you can see I've labeled the side of it. If I labeled it on here, it would wear off. I write what compound I'm using with that wheel on the wheel, and I store them in individual boxes like this so that I know this one's for Fabuluster, this one's for Zam, this one's for Rouge, and they never get mixed up, because you can end up ruining a piece that you spent tons of time on by polishing it with a compound that has grit from a lower level compound in it. So, you know, keep your things separate and sorted and labeled well, and in the end it will save you time. So I'm going to clear these things off the bench top because we want a safe work area. Now this machine has wheels that spin very fast. I'm going to turn it on for a second so you can see. They spin toward me. Think of this wheel spinning like the face of a clock. If 12 o'clock is here, and 6 o'clock is here, and 3 o'clock is here, and 9 o'clock is here, in the direction that it's spinning, I only want to work between 4 o'clock and 5 o'clock. That's where my piece will always be positioned. I don't want to be up here. I don't want to be down here, because this can pull my arms under and hurt me. This is not going to do anything but cut a dent in my piece. The reason you work between 4 and 5 is if you have an accident and the piece is pulled out of your hand, it will fly to the back of the machine and away from you. It also works most effectively here because this is where you're going to see the piece. It's in most jewelry studios with a buffing wheel. We use Tripoli on the left side and rouge on the right side. 9 times out of 10, if you walk into any metalsmith studio, Tripoli is here and rouge is here. So you progress like you would read a line of type. I'm going to charge these wheels with the compound, and then I'm going to work on one of these cuff bracelets to show you what it does. So here is my Tripoli. Again, you can see I still have my flex shaft attachment in this bag because that is a Tripoli wheel. I'm going to push a little bit of this out. There are lots of options for buying these compounds. You can even get a vegetarian version of this that is made with no animal products in the carrier. If you're a strict vegetarian or even religious dietary restrictions, you can buy non-tallow Tripoli and rouge from several jewelry sellers. So investigate that if you're needing that. But to charge the wheel, I'm going to start it slow. And I'm working between 4 and 5 o'clock. I'm just going to touch the wheel. This one's going to throw off a lot of felt because it's a new wheel. Okay, see the color of the wheel changed. That is charged. There's a lot of fuzzies on this, but it doesn't matter. Tripoli cuts metal. You might think you're only polishing, but you are removing metal when you are using Tripoli because there is grit in here. So you don't want to press too hard. This is an etched brass bracelet that I'm just going to give a polish to because, as you can see by the tarnish, it's been living in my studio without being polished for a long time. So I'm going to just run this at a comfortable speed. It can go very, very fast. I don't like to work that fast with this machine. You would only go this high if you were doing a mirror finish on a large surface. So to use this, I'm going to keep my elbows in. I'm going to brace my feet. And the #1 rule with this machine is let it go. If you feel the piece pulling out of your hands, just let go of it. Don't try and save it. Don't worry about it. It's just a piece of metal. It's not worth your fingers. So I'm going to hold everything in tight, make sure I have nothing dangling or hanging, and I'm going to work back and forth. So I'm going to hold the piece. I'm not pressing. I'm just moving the piece back and forth. I'm going to turn it around and go the other way. And remember, you are cutting metal with Tripoli. So if you're doing gold or silver, you're removing metal at this point, so don't get too ambitious or your piece will disappear. So you can see I've got stripes where this I haven't polished and this I have. So you want to just keep observing the piece. Try and get an even finish all the way across. And really, the polishing arbor is best for cuff bracelets. This machine was made to polish this shape of jewelry. Large bowls, if you do forming or forging, a large piece works fabulous on this machine. And that's not saying that you can't do things that are smaller, and I'll show you those in a second. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So you can see I've got a relatively even surface on this. The reflectivity is pretty consistent all the way across. There's a high spot right there that needs to be cleaned. So you get the idea. Now I want to turn the machine off. And the next thing to do immediately is wash this piece, because if you set it on the bench and walk away and come back, you're going to jump to rouge and forget that there's still Tripoli on this piece. So wash it. Soap and water. I'm just going to use like a little bit of dishwashing liquid, a toothbrush, whatever. You will see how much compound will come off this piece when I dip it in the water. So I hope. So wash it and dry it. That's maybe 10% gray. Again, when you use the when you go back and forth between the wheels, you want it to be dry as well. You don't want water to touch the compound. So that's just Tripoli, and you can see it's a significant difference from the inside where it was when I started. While that's air drying, I can show you some of the gadgets that they sell to help you work with this machine better. This is a wooden ring mandrel that I've got a plain silver band that I made. It's a half round band that I put inside out. This is great for polishing rings because tiny little things are hard and dangerous to hold. This is much easier to hold on to, and I can just give that ring a quick rouging like this. And my fingers are not getting covered in compound, and I'm working safe this way. So there's a ring mandrel for the arbor. There's also little pliers for holding like this. And then you can turn the piece. And see, my fingers are nowhere near that wheel. So these help you work safe and clean. Another one is, this is for bracelets, for flexible bracelets. I don't have a sample one, but you can see by the compound on here, you would wrap the bracelet around here and close the clasp, and then you can polish like this. And I just did a bad thing. Never look up from what you are doing. Only look at the work. You have to be focused with this. So you would put the bracelet on here and polish like this. So that's the Tripoli side of the wheel. Now I'm going to go over to the rouge side with this bracelet, if it's dry. And making a nice mess. So the rouge, same story. We would just charge the wheel a teeny bit. You don't need a lot of this compound. Just try and get a relatively even color change across the wheel. There we go, that's plenty. And I'm gonna put it back. And then I'm gonna polish. Now you want to, on the rouge side, you want to run a little faster than the Tripoli side, so I'm gonna turn that up a teeny bit more. That sounds good. And again, my arms are close in. I'm holding everything tight, but if it pulls, I'm going to let go of it. And I work evenly back and forth. Don't stay in one spot like that for a long time, because you will wear down your metal. You can see it's getting a nice mirror reflectivity on there now. Brass is wonderful to polish with rouge. It gets such a gorgeous sheen on it. It's a wonderful metal. Has a bad reputation, but I like it. And the thing that's making this piece interesting is that this is an etched bracelet, so the low areas are not polishing, but the high areas are. So the contrast between the mirror finish and the matte finish is what makes the surface of this metal exciting to look at. You know, people go for the high polished surface, but to me that's boring because there's no contrast. There's no juxtaposition of matte and shiny. So you get the idea. And the rouge side goes very quickly if you've done a good job to this point. And there we go. Again, I've just finished polishing this. The first thing I'm going to do before I do anything with this piece is give it a bath. And I probably have black all over my face too, so I might want to give myself a bath. But just give it a little soap and clean it off, and then it's ready to wear. The inside of this bracelet I would polish with the flex shaft, because there's no way you're going to get this cuff into the wheel without putting yourself in danger. So I would use a big muslin wheel on the flex shaft and just clean the inside of this bracelet on the other machine. And give that a little rinse in my bowl. And that's pretty darn shiny. So that's the basics of using the polishing machine. The most critical thing to remember, only work in this sector of the wheel. Don't mix up your compounds and be aware of your hands. Don't put a phone in the studio. Don't listen to the radio. Just observe your polishing, turn the machine off, and then do other things. This is not a place to multitask. You need to pay attention to this machine and wear your safety goggles. Here we are at the funnest part of the workshop, and that's seeing what happened in the tumbler while we were doing all that other work. Like I said, tumbling is great because it's the ultimate multitask. You can do it while you're doing something else. So I'm going to pour the payload out. You can see how dirty this water is just from polishing these things, but this is a copper and bronze load that I did. I removed patina. And these are, here we go, that's a great one. This is after, and this is what it looked like when I put it in. You can see it's got that gorgeous antique oxidation finish to it now. This is a fun and useful thing to do for your jump rings. If you make a lot of chainmail, you can put your rings on a piece of wire like this and close it. And that way you don't have to search individual jump rings out of here. You've got a whole clump of them. Those are copper rings. These are some soldered copper rings. This is, again, chain is beautiful in the tumbler. This is a combination of brass and copper chain that I made. Textured discs. This is another link for this bracelet. Here's a pin. This one I threw in to work harden, to make the metal stiff. The action of tumbling will harden the metal because the steel beating against the copper causes the molecules to compress in the metal. So that will make that pin a little stronger. Oh, here's another brass piece, another chain. This is a mixed metal chain with textured discs, another brass piece, and I think that's it. So that's kind of fun. It's like treasure hunting. Try using some power finishing in your studio. Again, equivalent to hand finishing. You can grind, sand, file, and polish with all of the machines we discussed. As you can see, the tumbler does a great job for polishing. The flex shaft and other rotary tools can do all of the processes, and the buffing wheel is great for big curved pieces and large objects that you want to get a mirror finish on. These are time savers. They do everything you can do with your hand tools, only faster. Remember to work safe, get inspired, and go play in your workshop with this equipment. You'll have a lot of fun. Thanks for being with me.
Hi, I'm Lexi Erickson, contributing editor to Lapidary Journal Jewelry Artist Magazine. I get many emails from our Lapidary Jewelry Artist readers, and though I'm best known for teaching soldering tricks and tips, I'm mostly asked about how do I finish my pieces. I like to finish my pieces by hand. I'm an old archaeologist, and I like my pieces to have texture and soul and life. I like them to look like they were dug up yesterday. My friend and fellow jeweler, Julie German-Melka, taught me that texture is life. I've always used little or no electricity in my work, and that includes all the finishing. So here's what we're going to cover: purchasing your silver and checking out the sheet silver for scratches and making sure it's not bent. How to store your silver, whether it's sheet, wire, or bezel wire. We talk about hardware store sandpapers and why I don't use them. What I do use, crocus cloth, which is available from Auto Parts, the 3M products, which should be in every jeweler's pantheon of jewelry supplies, why I do use electricity sometimes to clean up the inside of the bezels, and specialty jewelry making supplies like the spiders. I also use common kitchen supplies for finishing like Barkeeper's Friend, brass brushes, scrubbies, and Dawn detergent, just things you'd find at your grocery store. Let's imagine we have just finished soldering, pickling, and rinsing. So where do you go from there?